Hello from the Royal Palace in Stockholm. I'm Lucy Hockings from the BBC, and we've been invited to record the programme in this beautiful room by Their Royal Highnesses Crown Princess Victoria and Prince Daniel. Thank you.
Well, thank you. And warm welcome to the Royal Palace and to the Bernadotte Library. This library gathers thousands of books originally owned by past kings and queens from the Bernadotte dynasty, providing insights into their time. Just as knowledge shaped their world, it continues to shape ours. Science is an important part of meeting the complex challenges of today, challenges that our esteemed Nobel laureates address through their groundbreaking discoveries, guiding us toward a more enlightened future. There is a great strength in bringing together experts from different disciplines, as we do here this evening. And I am very much looking forward to the upcoming discussions. So once again, a warm welcome to all of you.
Laureates, thank you so much for joining us. This is the first time that you've gathered all together. It is my first time here too. It is an honour and a privilege for me to be here with you in beautiful Stockholm. So thank you for having me. And with us here in the audience are some of your friends and family I know as well, and some students from here in Sweden who have some wonderful questions they're going to be asking us later. So we're looking forward to hearing from them. We're going to look in turn at the work that you've all done. But I wanted to start by getting a sense of what it takes to become a Nobel laureate. And Omar, I thought I'd start with you. You've been awarded, Omar Yagi, the Nobel Prize in Chemistry. But when I heard your story, all I thought was what a determined young man you must have been to come from a family of refugees in Jordan and then today to be sitting here with us. Would you describe yourself as determined?
Yeah, I guess so. And it takes passion, I think. I mean, I fell in love with molecules when I was very young. I didn't even know they were molecules. I was just attracted to their beauty.
Omar, we're in this very beautiful library, and it was a library in a library you first discovered
True.
Chemistry.
Yes. Well, in my school, when I was 10 years old, the library was actually supposed to be locked during the break, and it's supposed to have an attendant that would watch the students and make sure we're well behaved. Well, I thought maybe I'd give it a try and see whether it's open or not, whether the door is unlocked, and certainly it was unlocked. And I went in there, and there I found a book that had these molecular drawings. I was captivated by them. I mean, I felt like I discovered something that nobody ever saw before.
Philippe Gagnon, you're the Nobel laureate in economics, but as a young person, you were so motivated by your social consciousness and things. What is it that got you into economics?
So I was, maybe the post-1968 generation in France. We wanted to change the world, make the world a better place. I was a militant in a left-wing party, and I would hear economic reasonings, all seemingly logical, leading to opposite conclusions. And I said, how can I find out who is right and who is wrong? And I started questioning myself. And to this day, I never stopped questioning myself. But it was the idea to better understand the world, to help transform it.
Fred Ramsdell, you are the Nobel laureate in physiology and medicine. And your story of how you found out that you had been awarded a Nobel Prize is quite something, and I think says something about your character. Can you tell us the story?
My wife and I and my dogs tend to go backpacking and camping every chance we get. We just love to be out in nature. And so we were off, and up at about 8,000 feet east of Yellowstone National Park in Wyoming, it snowed. I didn't know it was the weekend they gave out, or the week they gave out the Nobel Prizes. I had no clue. We had no cell service. My phone was in airplane mode. We drove through Yellowstone, and my wife's phone connected, And I was outside walking the dogs around in a little campground, and she started screaming in the car. And I thought, what's going on? And she came out with a big smile and said, you won the Nobel Prize. And I said, no, I didn't. And there may have been an expletive in there, I'm not sure. And she said, I have 200 text messages from our friends that said you do.
200 text messages, yeah.
Oh, yeah, I had more text messages in 2 days than I had in the entirety of 2024. I did the math, it was crazy.
And Mary, you are a colleague of friends, Mary Branco, another of the Nobel laureates in physiology and medicine. When you were a small girl, you wanted to be a doctor, you wanted to help people.
Yeah.
Has that driven you throughout your life, that motivation?
Yeah, that's been a big motivating force. I also went through a period of time where I wanted to be a veterinarian, so just helping in general and caring for people. But when I went down the more research track, then I realized I could still, maybe not work directly with patients, but hopefully what we find in research and what we can translate into things that help human health also make me feel like I'm, helping people in a less direct way, but perhaps more broadly, which is very satisfying.
Michel Devereux, you're Nobel laureate in physics. Congratulations. I think sometimes for many of us, physics can feel a bit baffling, maybe sometimes counterintuitive. I wonder if you need a degree of just acceptance about the laws of physics to be able to think further and to succeed.
I think what I would say is that when you learn these subjects, you have to have a certain amount of patience. So if you try to understand everything right away, you can be very frustrated. So I think that you have to embrace these concepts that seem very weird at the beginning, but year after year, you learn them more.
And John Martinez, another of the laureates in physics. I know your parents raised you, and I think this is absolutely a fantastic idea for all parents, to ask a question every day.
Yes.
Have you asked any questions since you've been here?
After the chemistry lecture, I had some questions about it, and it was funny because I kind of felt like I was asking a dumb question. I should have known this.
But you're the kid at the back of the class.
Well, I kind of prefaced this, but I got some really good answers as to how to think about it in my own way. And I think they liked the questions.
Yeah, that was a very good question. Yes. And I answered it well.
And those questions are how I really more deeply understood what they were doing, and kind of building a mental model in my mind.
And has this been a sort of guiding principle for you throughout your life, just making sure that every day you're questioning?
Yeah, that's right. That's what our parents, the story is, when you're a child, you sit around the dinner table, the parents ask you what you did today, and you kind of roll your eyes, okay, because that's boring. But they always ask me, well, did you ask a question? And that really trains you very well as a scientist.
Susumu Kitagawa, Nobel laureate in chemistry. Where did your love of chemistry come from?
Yeah, and I think when I was a junior high school student, maybe 10 years old or something, in the elementary school, they had events in just hiking outside or the sports event. So several times it rains. Everything stopped. I was so sad. And so one day I want to be a scientist to control weather freely. But still, we could not do this. But this is my big motivation that time.
Wanted to control the weather?
Yeah.
Okay.
We can't even predict the weather.
John Mulcair, Nobel laureate in economics, you have reached, I think some would say, a summit in your career. Your life could have taken a very different path, though, when you were a young man.
Yes, well, I was serving in the military in Israel, and I went to take tests to become an officer. And at the end of the day, you went in for a 5-minute interview, and they were told if you passed, you were going to become an officer or not. And so I walked in, and there's this psychologist, and he opens my dossier, and he looks at me, and he smiles, and he says, Joel, says, you are not fit to lead or to be led. And so at first I was crushed, but upon reflection, it occurred to me that the only thing I could do in life was become an academic. Because you do not lead and you are not led. You are self-employed. What makes, I think, a good academic, and that's, I think, everybody around this table must be sharing that with me, is self-discipline.
Well, let's turn now to the work that has won you all your awards. And we're going to start with economics. Let's have a look at the work. Over the last 2 centuries, for the first time in history, the world has seen sustained economic growth. The laureates in economics, Joel Mokia and Philippe Aghion, together with Peter Howitt, explained how innovation and new technologies are essential to further progress and why competition policy, letting new and better products outcompete companies with older ones, is needed for growth to continue. This process of creative destruction creates conflict that must be managed. Otherwise, innovation will be blocked by established companies and interest groups that are put under threat. If innovations are to succeed one another in a self-generating process, we need not only to know that something works, but also why. Before the Industrial Revolution, a lack of this knowledge made it difficult to build on new discoveries. The laureates' work can support policymakers in creating research and development policies. Joel, we've become used to the idea that our economies just keep growing year on year with occasional blips, but that we become richer all of the time. But that hasn't always been the case, has it? I mean, what's changed?
Well, in fact, not only that it hasn't always been the case, if you consider human history to be, say, a 12-hour clock, okay? Real growth started at 5 minutes to midnight. For most of human history, the good old times may have been old, but they weren't good. People were poor. The vast bulk of humanity lived on the brink of famine, disease, death, and misery. We're living in a world that is radically different. And the question is, how did we become that way? And so there's more than one answer to that. But the answer I have been focusing on for the last, 20 years or so is that we have been accumulating something which I call useful knowledge, which is sort of a compilation of science and technology, but also the interaction between them, that we've been able to harness natural regularities and laws for our own material purposes.
And Philippe, you worked with Peter Howitt, who also shares this prize but can't be with us today, to look at how creative destruction fuels growth. Can you explain what that is? What is creative destruction?
So, creative destruction was a term coined by Joseph Schumpeter to refer to the process whereby new innovation displace old technologies. So what we did with Peter Howitt is to build a growth model around the notion of creative destruction. And the basic ideas are that long-run growth is driven by cumulative innovation, where each innovator stands on giant shoulders. We build on previous innovations. The second idea is that innovation do not come from heaven. They're done a lot by, of course, researchers, but entrepreneurs who pursue innovation because they want to make a profit out of it. They want to, if you make a better product, you get a rent. And the third idea is creative destruction. New innovation displaces old technology. But at the heart of the paradigm, there is a contradiction. On the one hand, you need the innovation rents to motivate innovation activity. But on the other hand, yesterday's innovators are tempted to use their rents to prevent subsequent innovations because they don't want themselves to be subject to creative destruction. And managing a market economy is how to deal with this contradiction.
Can I ask some of the other laureates whether you're comfortable with this idea of growth in such a way? Michel, do you have concerns?
Yes. The question is, can we grow without limit? I mean, what about the finite resources? At some point, we have also to modify this growth system, which, wants to consume more and more resources of the earth.
Fred, do you have concerns about growth?
There's a knee-jerk reaction. We see that growth favors a very small number of people. And so
Exactly.
we're actually getting farther and farther apart. I take your point. The bottom is still way better off than they were even 100 years ago, let alone 1,000 years ago. But the gap gets really big. And so I don't know whether there's a policy way to do that, but I love the idea that you can find economics as a way to bring everyone up. I'm really curious, your comment about innovation changing things, I think that resonates, makes total sense. Is there a predictability to that? Can you predict when, where, how innovation will be disruptive?
You cannot say for sure it will be disruptive, but you can create conditions that will favor more disruptive innovation. You cannot say for sure it will come in. But for example, in the US are many things I criticize with the US, but and currently especially. But they have a system where they encourage short-term failure, you see,
yes,
and long-term success.
Yes.
Anything that can say. When you say, if you fail now, that's great. Please fail.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
That's good. In France, we tend to discourage short-term failure. But you raise another point on inclusive growth. You're absolutely right. If we don't make growth inclusive, you get populism. Why do we get populism? In France, we are on the brink of maybe having the extreme right in power in 18 months. Mm-hmm. Because many people felt left out of the process. And I think it's very important that growth be inclusive.
Let me add one small point to that, and that is that the kind of processes that Philippe and I are working on are beneficial on average. But the average conceals the fact that there are winners and that there are losers. And there are almost no inventions I can think of that did not involve somebody losing. I mean, you look at one of the most famous invention in history, which is the invention of the printing press in the middle of the 15th century. So there's a whole army of people who's made their living transcribing books by hand, copying them by hand. And all these copiers basically were put out of business by the printing press. And so the question is, how do you make the losers accept the changes? And I think we've made some progress on that. The welfare state's purpose, to a great extent, was to look at the people who are either losers or potential losers and say, look, if you are to be put out of work because of this innovation, there is a safety net.
Okay. We have some students from around Sweden in the audience with some burning questions for our laureates. Oscar.
Europe has had a great progress regarding new innovations, everything from the art of printing to the steam engine. But today it seems like the progress has stagnated a bit compared to the US and China. So my question is, does the regulatory landscape in Europe hold us back? And if so, do you have an advice to give?
Philippe.
First, we don't have a true single market for goods and services. When you innovate, you need a market for your innovation. It's a segmented, each European country has its own regulation. We call that gold plating. We don't have a true single market. The second thing is that we don't have a proper financial ecosystem. I was telling you about risk-taking. You need to be able to fail in the short run. Venture capital helps you there. We are totally below in Europe. And we don't have in Europe the equivalent of the DARPA, the Defense Advanced Project Agency, this kind of pro-competition way to do industrial policy. Europe is a regulatory giant and a budgetary dwarf. And that has to change.
Well, we're going to move on now to look specifically at the work done by our chemistry laureates, Susumu Kitagawa and Omar Yagi. Let's have some background now as to why you, along with Richard Robson, have been awarded this year's Nobel Prize in Chemistry. Susumu Kitagawa, Richard Robson and Omar Yagi are rewarded with the Chemistry Prize for their work on building molecules together into structures, which the Nobel Committee called molecular architecture. They worked out how to build constructions with large spaces between the molecules through which gases and other chemicals can flow. These rooms could be used to harvest water from desert air, to capture and store chemicals that humans want to get rid of, including carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, to deliver pharmaceuticals to specific organs in the body, or to trap ethylene gas from fruit to make them ripen more slowly.
They can be used to separate PFAS, a group of so-called forever chemicals, from water.
Omar, what for you is the most sort of exciting application as a result of your research?
We can trap and store hydrogen for clean energy, take CO2 out of the air to clean the air, and as we have done, taking water out of the air to make drinking water.
That's remarkable.
So I think that the most important contribution here in terms of creating porosity is the fact not only can you create skeletons that are porous, but you can also design them and craft their interior, customize their interior on the atomic molecular level with precision so that they are tailored for specific properties.
So Sumi, this feels so significant as a discovery. Would you say that we are entering a new age?
Yeah, and we are entering. In the 19th century, the people used coal, and 20th century in the petroleum. Our century, it's an age of gas. Just I told you, in the air is widely distributed. So even the very small countries, but they can freely use this air. So that's very important.
I'm wondering what the rest of you, I mean, I'm looking at your face,
That's
Mary.
pretty, yeah. Well, I had one first question was, how long ago did you realize the power of the MOF? You know, how many years ago?
Well, I think the initial discovery came we reported in 1995, and that was how do you take constituents of matter, which are inorganic and organic, combine them together and still make an ordered system, such that things come together in an ordered fashion. And in the case of our work, that the pores would be homogeneous in size and shape. That's almost like a miracle.
I think many people probably feel that they're concerned about climate change as well, and that we're still wrestling with this idea of how you can take CO2 out of the atmosphere. But what you're saying is we definitely can. It's been solved.
Well, already MOFs are deployed in cement plants to take up CO2 out of flue gas before it reaches the atmosphere. Okay, so that's right there is a demonstration that we can trap CO2 in an economic fashion. Now, out of the air is a little bit harder. You know, we've put in the air, since we started burning fossil fuels, almost, well, more than 1,100 gigatons of CO2. Okay, that's a lot of CO2 that we have to take out of the air. This is the extra CO2 that we must take out of the air. This is the CO2 that's causing climate change. This is the CO2 that's screwing up our planet. So we have now materials that can do that.
So if we know how to do it.
So I would go as far as to say that the scientific challenge of cleaning the air from this extra CO2 is done.
So what if that's done? What is missing is what political will and
well, I think
economics, the money to do it.
I mean, as scientists, we find solutions to problems facing society, but society has to have the will to take our findings and say, in this particular case, this is a global problem and requires many countries, at least the G20, to decide this is a crisis that we need to address now.
My question was with AI. Many people criticize AI, saying AI consumes lots of energy. And my view is that AI may also help us save a lot of energy. Is it the case that in your area, the use of AI would help you in your attempt to use what you do to clean up the air?
AI could help us speed up discovery, help us in scaling up these materials, help us achieve better answers, help us in asking new questions. And so for the last 3 years, I've been transforming my group into an entirely AI group that combines experiment with AI, where we can feed these models, not just the positive results, but also the negative results. And these models become a lot better.
Okay. And we have another question now from one of our students, Anastasia. Hi.
Hi. I'm wondering, how do you see AI being integrated into medical science without jeopardizing the ethical standards and the quality of research?
I think it's critical that we actually be able to use AI tools, to access the data. But you're correct in that there's the potential for misuse in some of that. And I don't know that there's a great solution to that. Certainly there will be regulatory roles there, et cetera. I know that becomes challenging, but I do think there's going to have to be some oversight and some control around that. I also think, though, that it's going to help with identifying new hypotheses, new approaches that we can all take at the very early stages of understanding biology and translating that into meaningful medicines. So I do think it'll have a really positive result at early stages as well, where I would worry much less about privacy and other issues around those sorts of things with AI.
What are your thoughts, Mary, on AI?
The kinds of data that are being generated and analyzed really can't be handled by a single human brain. We have to use AI to make sense of it, but there also has to be the scientist to sort of understand what questions are to be asked and what the next steps are. But certainly the power of AI makes things possible.
My biggest concern is using large databases in which some of the input data is just frankly wrong. So you've got to be able to ensure you've got quality, right? But I do think it has really incredible value in some of the healthcare industry, and particularly in some of the large databases. And I think Mary can speak to this much better than I can, but I do imagine that it's going to revolutionize the way we process and deliver healthcare.
Let's move on now to the laureates in physiology and medicine and the work that they've done. Here's a short introduction to why they won their prize.
The body's powerful immune system must be regulated. Otherwise, it might attack our own organs. Shimon Sakaguchi, Mary Branco, and Fred Ramsdale are awarded the Medicine Prize for identifying a previously unknown class of immune cells, regulatory T cells, which prevent other immune cells from harming our bodies. The ability to control these so-called security guards makes it possible to activate and deactivate the immune system, helping the development of medical treatments for cancer and autoimmune diseases, and of more successful organ transplants. Several of these treatments are now undergoing clinical trials.
Mary and Fred, congratulations, and you won this award along with Shimon Sakaguchi, who's not with us today, after a discovery that the two of you made some time ago. So Mary, tell us about it.
So the discovery that we're being honored for started in the mid-90s. The Human Genome Project had launched in 1990, and there was a lot of excitement about what possibilities could come out of that kind of science. And so this startup company called Darwin Molecular that Fred and I both became involved in had a vision that you could use, gene-based discovery to find new novel drug targets. So start a project that's based on just an interesting phenotype, so an interesting, biological trait. And if you could understand the genetic basis of it, perhaps that would lead to sort of a novel way of getting to a drug target that could be developed into a therapy. And one of the main biological areas that we were interested in was autoimmunity and the immune system. And so, yeah.
And Fred, it's already having an impact in terms of treatment.
It's starting to, absolutely. I mean, so what Mary discovered and what we and Shimon discovered as well is that the gene that she found and that we've characterized controls and is responsible for a very small population of cells in our blood and our tissues that keeps us from getting sick. So most of us don't have MS and most of us don't have Crohn's disease, and it's because of these cells. And so now we know about these cells. We didn't really have a good handle on them before. So now we understand the cells that essentially keep our immune system in check from destroying our own bodies. Normally it's designed to protect us from pathogens, right? The immune system keeps us safe from COVID and flu and whatever else, but it also recognizes our own tissues sometimes. And these cells prevent that. And so now we're actually, what we couldn't do in 2000 was really take advantage of that, because the technologies didn't exist to do cell therapy or even gene therapy in any particular realistic way. 25 years ago. Today, you can't.
So many people are affected by autoimmune diseases. My son has celiac disease, for instance. So, of course, my question is, could this lead to a cure?
Most of my professional life, no one in my business wants to talk about cure. You want to talk about therapy and treatment because cure is a really high bar. It's not that people don't want to be cured. It's just a really high bar. But we want to talk about cure because I think there is the possibility of that. Now, we're a long way from that still, but you can see how this develops into a cure. You can see the path forward. You know, there's a lot of hills and valleys between here and there, but at least you can see where you're going.
Mary, that word cure is so powerful as a word. How does it feel to be working, doing research on something that could lead to a cure?
Well, I couldn't have predicted at the time that we would be talking like this. I mean, the work started 30 years ago. And as Fred said, the idea of actually using cell therapy was really not even contemplated. You know, it was something we could not have predicted at the time we started.
And Joel, I know your wife is an immunologist.
It's sitting there in the
As
audience,
well.
and
Listening with fascination, I'm sure. to
yeah,
what
she's
she's
listening with
hearing.
fascination. Now,
Has she given you a question to ask?
Well, I don't know. I mean, we've been, she and I wrote one paper together in the 51 years that we've been married, 56 years that we've been married.
You need to get that right.
Yeah, but you know, she is a tumor immunologist, but there's something that really struck me that I want to raise when that Fred said, and that is, he sort of said, well, 25 years ago we had this idea, but we didn't have the tools and we didn't have the technology to do this. And this is, I think, a magnificent example of how progress actually works and how I don't think we ever have to worry that much about resources, because not only that it is true, of course, that science creates technology in the fact that we know more and then we know how to apply it, but it also works the other way around, that new tools are developed by engineers, by technicians, that then make scientists see further. So what that really means is there is no ceiling. I mean, we ain't seen nothing yet.
Yeah, that's correct. I mean, right now, the way we're trying to employ this is, I won't say crude, but it's challenging. It's labor intensive. It's difficult. We take out cells, we engineer them, we put them back in. It's a long, expensive, difficult process. I am sure that in some number of years, I don't know if that's 5, 10, or 20, we will do this in a much more facile way in the patient. We may even be using molecules like Omar is describing, but we're going to do this in a much different way in 20 years. And I don't know exactly what that's going to look like, but I know it'll be different.
Exactly.
I had a question on, of course, innovators need to appropriate, need to get grants. But on the other hand, the very early stage of research need to be open and free. Freedom and openness is important. And it's always, you see, you have this trade-off. Some parts are proprietary when you are closer to commercialization. Yeah. But you need openness and freedom is so important. And do you have a view on this yourself? Have you experienced this tension?
Absolutely. Experienced the tension? Absolutely. I mean, I've worked for a biotech company most of my life. Absolutely. And I scientifically grew up, as did Mary, in the era where we didn't know what the genes were. And so we thought the genes had value. And sometimes they really did. And so when you found one, you patented it. Some turned out to be extraordinarily valuable. So, and we didn't know, and you never knew which ones. So that tension is absolutely there.
And Fred, you've actually been backed by Bill Gates.
Well, yeah, so the work that we did, the company was funded by Bill Gates and Paul Allen. So yes, they're venture capitalists, but they were not in the business to make money. They were the 2 richest people on the planet at the time. So they weren't trying to make money. They wanted to make change. They wanted to do something interesting. There's very few examples of that today. Well, there weren't actually very many back then, and there's still very few today. And so most basic research is still going to depend on government funding. There's no way around that, and at least I don't see a way around that.
That is subsiding, though, isn't it, Joel, would you say? I mean, is there need to be more sort of pressure on multi-billionaires in the world to roll up their sleeves and contribute to this?
You would think that what has happened in the US in the last 10 years is 2 things. One is that the government is becoming increasingly reluctant to fund research, and in some cases uses that research to force certain constraints and limitations on universities, including my own, I should ought to say, in order to force them to do things they wouldn't do on their own, simply by threatening the government funding. But the second thing is, I think that in the United States, as well as in Europe, fiscal deficits and national debts will become increasingly onerous, and that the willingness to spend large amounts of money on research is going to decline among the voters, and that will put government in a very different parquet. At the same time, however, we have had this phenomenon of the number of billionaires. I mean, I just heard this story a week ago, as again keeps going up, and $1 billion is not what it used to be, but it's still a lot of money.
So, Sumo, what is the picture with funding in Japan? And if it's harder to access in America, has that been good for Japan?
Yeah, in Japan, traditionally, government has an important role. 20 years ago, 30 years ago, the fundamental research funding works very well. But right now, it's a kind of the zero-sum game. So because the competition between many companies, many countries, and they want to have a top position in the individual AI and in the quantum and the devices, something. So it's a big problem. So we are very pleased to award the Nobel Prize in the two Japanese. So the government and the public interested in these results. So that means we have to push more to invest in the fundamental science.
You are a superstar in Japan now.
Not a superstar. If the successful, this kind of the money.
You're being modest, Sumo. Omar, with the environment changing over funding, do you think we're seeing more money, research, even innovation starting to happen in China?
Yeah, I mean, I think the Chinese have been investing constantly and also expanding their investment in research in the categories that Susumu just outlined, the basic research and the applied research and ultimately the commercialization type of research. And they also produce a lot more scientists and STEM-based measures. So, I mean, compared to, let's say, the US, China produces 35% of their graduates are scientists and engineers, while in the US, I think it's around 5 to 6%.
Well, let's move on to another question that we've had from the audience. Ebba.
Thank you. Was there any moment in your career or during your research when you began to suspect that your work might one day be recognized with the Nobel Prize? Or did it come as a surprise when you received the call?
Okay, excellent. John?
You shouldn't do this kind of research for the Nobel Prize. It's just an award bestowed on you by chance. But you know what you all know what I mean. But it's just the doing of the science that's the real thrill of science.
Wonderful, thank you so much. The last award we're going to look at is the Nobel Prize in Physics. Let's have a look at the work.
We're used to a world where if you throw a ball against a solid wall, the ball will always bounce right back. In the quantum world, things are a little different. If you fire a subatomic particle like an electron at a barrier, most of the electrons will bounce back. But there's a chance the electron will tunnel through to the other side. For a long time, this phenomenon was thought to occur only on a tiny microscopic scale. But this year's laureates in physics, John Clark, Michel Devoret, and John Martinez, showed that this effect could be reproduced in electrical circuits in the real macroscopic world. This discovery has been harnessed by scientists in making modern quantum chips and paves the way for the development of the quantum computer. The Nobel Committee said there is no advanced technology used today that does not rely on quantum mechanics, including mobile phones, cameras, and fibre optic cables.
Now, John, this idea of quantum tunneling, which you illustrate so well, when the electron burrows through the energy barrier, that was originally held to be impossible by conventional physics, wasn't it? I mean, this must be seen as a big breakthrough, what you've done.
So the idea of tunneling actually is quite old. It proceeded after the understanding of quantum mechanics. But what was different about our experiment is that tunneling has been understood for, let's say, how electrons and fundamental particles work. But this is now expanded to something we called macroscopic variables. And in this particular case, we make electrical circuit that's, you can see with your own eyes. And then it's the current and voltages of that electrical circuit, which is composed of billions of electrons, that tunnels in some mathematical way, that tunnels into a new state of the electrical circuit that we measure.
Wow. Michel, some of the applications of your research, can you explain for us?
If you can assemble a lot of quantum bits, you can build a quantum computer. And so that's what our discovery has essentially enabled, the building of quantum machines. Machines where quantum mechanics functions at the macroscopic level, at the level of information processing, for instance.
There's been a decline in young people taking physics at school. It's really hard to find teachers to teach physics. Does there need to be a change in how it's taught?
Yes, certainly there's a big effort to be done in popularizing quantum mechanics. People have done it, but there's a lot more to do.
And I think some of the experiments that have been done in the last 20, 40 years, if written in a popular way, I think could teach quantum mechanics in a much more intuitive way.
Yes, I think that the saving grace here is that there are more and more experiments that actually embody the basic principles. The problem with quantum mechanics is it was reverse engineered. The laws were reverse engineered from very complicated phenomena.
Isn't there a famous statement attributed to Richard Feynman who said, if you think you've understood quantum mechanics, you haven't understood it?
Yes, but this shouldn't be quoted too often, because in some sense it's discouraging, and I think it's wrong.
But I also think we've learned a lot since that quote. And and he popularized the idea of making a quantum computer, and that effort by us has made it, I think, a lot more clear.
Yes, so I think that what you will see is there will be more and more machines and experiments that would clarify the concept of quantum mechanics.
Can I ask, Mary, you about education? Because, of course, with STEM subjects, not enough students now are doing them, but particularly girls, and more girls are taking STEM, but they're still underrepresented. Do you think some of the messaging needs to be changed?
I think so. I think, like you say, I think there are more girls going into STEM and more young women going into higher education in the STEM subjects. But I think the situation could improve even further, I guess, with more, role models. So I think we need more women at higher levels in the education system, academia, corporate world, the pharmaceutical industries, et cetera, would, I think, demonstrate to more and more young scientists coming up what the possibilities are.
Like a Nobel Prize.
Like a Nobel Prize. That helps, yeah.
But thank you. And another question from one of our students, Kate Mwasi.
How can we promote more outside-the-box thinking in an educational system that still remains largely unchanged and is still largely dependent on, for example, students recalling single correct solutions?
John Mulcair.
I grew up in a country, Israel, which has been at the frontier of technological growth in many areas. Israel went from a poor third world country, which it was in the 50s, to a country with a GDP that's higher than Italy and Spain. And that's exactly because they have defeated, to some extent, this sort of inertia that high schools impose on students. Now, what is true, of course, that it's not true for everybody. But one of the sort of empirical regularities of innovation is in the fact that most of it is done by a relatively small number of people. And selecting those, pulling them out, and giving them this special training and moving them ahead understanding that these are the people that are going to get the economy going, that takes out-of-the-box thinking as well.
We teach science not in the way that students like to learn science. So I think we need to change our technique. We need to make it more relevant. We need to give examples about applications and work in a way, go from applications to fundamental principles, make it more interesting.
Well, before we come to an end, I mean, you've all had such a busy week with awards and concerts, banquets, giving your lectures and things as well. I'm sure you're all quite exhausted, but when you get back home, I think we'd all love to know what you all plan to do and what your, relaxation before Christmas schedule might look like. Omar, what are you planning to do once you get home?
Well, I mean, I think the prize has infused a more intense energy than I've ever had. And there's so much more to do. And so, yeah, I mean, after the announcement, I went right back into the lab. I never took a day off.
That doesn't sound very restful, Omar. What do you do to relax?
I feel restful because I'm doing the stuff that I love.
I will say that Philippe and I agreed last summer, long before either of us dreamed about the prize, to write a book together. And just having listened to, people sitting around this table, I have much more energy, because what I understand is exactly that new ideas are not getting harder to find, because now I hear these fantastic advances in human knowledge, in things that I thought were beyond our understanding. Autoimmune disease, CO2 capture from the atmosphere in large quantities, a new physics of energy. I mean, how can anybody say that all the low-hanging fruits have been picked and that everything important that can be invented has been invented? Okay, we're going to write a book that will finally put those these techno-pessimism, to bury it so deep under the ground that nobody can ever find it again. And we're going to write a book that will drive that home. And thanks to the Nobel Prize, we're going to get a much larger advance.
Philippe, I hope you're not starting the book.
I have nothing to add. I think it's all been said.
Mary, your plans? So a well-earned rest, I'm sure.
My plan, yes, I'd look forward to some rest. What I really look forward to is catching up with all the people that I have been hearing from since the announcement of the award. I'm completely behind on replying to the amazing number of messages and stuff from people that I've known all throughout my life. And so I'm looking forward to reconnecting with people and then figuring out next steps.
And the two of you like to go hiking together, I understand.
Yeah.
You've got some walks planned?
Yes. It's important to keep in good shape, and hiking together we can discuss new ideas. But,
so you talk shop, you talk about work when you're walking?
Among other things, but generally, yeah.
No, my neighbor at this table said that this work-life balance is maybe not formulated correctly. You said that, I like what you said, that you cannot dissociate actually recreation from work. It's true that it's by doing other things that you get your best ideas. You're not getting good ideas in science in just
you must
thinking
be
about
planning some quality time in your garage then, are you, John? Some building
but
to do?
actually, I was just thinking about the hiking, and there's a lot of things that I learned here, and I need to kind of process that. And what I find is kind of the runner's high you get when I go hiking is really good for creativity and getting a lot of ideas. But the problem is afterwards, about half the ideas, once you kind of come down from the runner's high, about half the ideas don't make any sense at all. So you have to filter them afterwards.
Half of them do?
Yeah, right. Okay, yeah, right.
Pretty good rate.
Pretty good.
Pretty good percentage.
Yeah, that's right. Thank you. That's a good correction.
Taking a good shower can help also.
And dishwashing. I love to do that.
Yes.
Oh God, I never use the dishwasher. I like to do, it's very inspiring.
Can you come spend some time in my house?
Anytime, I can do that.
Anytime you want to come around and do our dishes. Susumu, what about you? What will you do to relax?
After the announcement in October, and I'm very busy, so I like just walking. And I commute train, but I get off the 2 stations or more before the terminal. So I like walking because Kyoto is the old capital. So the street is fascinating, just like a Cartesian coordinates. And so there are many choice of the passage. Okay, so I love to find the shrine temples, of course, and the restaurants, small restaurants, and the bakeries or something like that. It's very fun, but I could not walk in this month, last month. So I'm back to the Kyoto, so I want to walk.
Kyoto is such a beautiful city to walk in, as is Stockholm, I must say. And Fred, you have been to Stockholm before, but we have a photo of you, actually, and you're standing next to a camper van here in Stockholm.
Yes.
Can you tell us what is in that photo?
Yes, so it was 2002, 2004, I don't remember what year it was, and I'm dressed much more in my normal fashion, which is blue jeans and sandals and a T-shirt, I think. And I was just on holiday here with my wife and some friends, and we were walking around the Nobel Museum area, and I think the museum had just opened up, but outside there somewhere was a small caravan or travel trailer that said Nobel Museum on it. And I looked at it and said, this is as close as I'm ever gonna get. And so they took a picture of me pointing at this thing. And it happens a lot. So I was coming on the 50%. I was really apparently quite wrong.
And
so,
here you are.
Here I am.
Does it feel surreal sometimes?
Oh, no, not sometimes, all the time. It's 100% surreal. Absolutely. But I will tell you that having my friends and colleagues here is as, if not more, emotionally satisfying than winning the award.
Thank you all very much. Thank you. Well, that is all from this year's Nobel Minds from the Royal Palace in Stockholm. It has been an absolute privilege to have this fascinating discussion with some of the best minds in the world. And I'd like to thank Her Royal Highness, Crown Princess Victoria and Prince Daniel for being here with us today, and to all of you here in the audience as well. From me, Lucy Hockings, and the rest of the team, goodbye.